Hey. Good morning. Oops, sorry. That's what I just accidentally did. Okay. There are not a lot of people in, so I think we will give a minute to see if anyone else is joining before we get started.
Are you okay if I allow everyone's mic and camera so that they can unmute?
Okay, good morning. We're going to get started. We have some of the starting things to cover anyway while people are trickling in. Welcome to the public workshop for our revised draft data guidelines version 4.0. I am Jenny Reed. I am the supervisor of the data analytics unit with Energy Safety, and I'm going to be presenting today. Okay, there we go. Here's our agenda. It's the same as our last workshop. We'll do an introduction with housekeeping stuff, and I will do a presentation of the significant changes. That's from our first draft to this revised draft, and then we will have time for public comment. I want to take just a minute now to thank anyone on the meeting who submitted comments in our first round. Thank you for your feedback and your input. And we did review and consider all the comments that we received, and we appreciate your participation. So a quick safety message. This is a hybrid meeting. You know, we're here in person, but a lot of people are on their own. Be aware of your surroundings, and especially if you're alone and something doesn't feel right and you need assistance, please chime in, enter in the chat, or raise your hand so that we know something's wrong. Again, I'm Jenny Reed, and I will be presenting for the meeting. And we might, if there are people, you know, we have other staff here to answer questions, and they'll introduce themselves as needed. Now, for participation, sorry, let's see. Audio comments, please use the raise hand feature if you want to ask a question or make a comment. And there should be audio instructions if you dialed in on a phone that are in there. But if you're having trouble locating that, try to enter in the chat. We can get some to try to help you out. And I guess you can't do that if it's audio. I don't know. Written comments, Q&A comment feature, just the same as last time. There we go. Okay, so clarifying questions, save them for the end of this section just to see if, you know, it's getting answered. But again, you know, if it's something and you're worried about losing the train of it, just, you can raise your hand, and not gonna be super strict about that for clarifying questions. For comments, please save those for the public comment item at the end of the meeting. Okay, we'll just kick it off with start getting the review of the significant changes going. I'm having a little bit of a screen issue. Okay. All right, so I just want to start off by reminding everyone that this workshop is for convenience, for information sharing, is not an exhaustive review of all of the changes in the published revised draft data guidelines version 4.0. In order to see all the changes, you should reference the published red line. And also, we've published for your convenience 2 change logs, the geodatabase template change log and the template workbooks change log. And those help to point out changes that aren't as visible in the red line, like because they're in the templates. All right, so this is a rough just guide of what we're going to cover in the review of the significant changes. In our first workshop, we focused on the sections, changes to section 2, changes to section 3. But because there are so much fewer changes in this draft, and those changes tend to be around like a theme, like a type of change that has effects in more than one location, it's organized a little differently. So I'll start with the biggest change, which is the alignment with the revisions to WMP Guidelines Appendix A. And that changes related to that occur throughout the guidelines document. So I'll run through kind of the nature of those changes and how that alignment flows out through the guidelines. Then we'll move on to a change in the GIS section, section 3, a couple of changes in the section 4, the tabular data section, and those, again, they're changes that occur in multiple locations. And then lastly, we'll cover just a couple isolated changes that only really hit one spot. All right, so getting started with the alignment with WMP Guidelines Appendix A. Probably most people on the call tuning in are aware of the WMP guidelines, the second draft of the WMP guidelines that are out now. As changes take place there, they oftentimes affect our data collection. So to see where that's flowing from, please do refer to the WMP Guidelines of Appendix A, specifically the definition of terms, some changes there that flow through, and then the definition of initiatives by category. The data guideline impacts of these changes, first, the most obvious place is in Appendix C, where we basically apply that table that explains the categories and the initiatives, and then now some select activities. And we make that available in Appendix C of the data guidelines for reporting purposes, implementing it for the purposes of the data collection. And all of these changes surround the clarification of the category, initiative, activity hierarchy. And those changes are pushed out through the GIS and the tabular schemas, both in field names and in field definitions. And then there are related general language clarification throughout. So we'll get into some examples. So now these darker blue slides, they're the examples, and you'll see, again, these are not exhaustive. These are selected as examples to highlight the ways in which these changes flow out through the document. So in the GIS side, the initiative feature data set is the feature data set that impacted changes. And you'll see that old linking of initiative activity as a phrase, initiative activity. You can see in the there, my cursor showed up, it's laggy, but right here, initiative activity. So those are disentangled. Those are clarified now. There's an initiative, there is an activity. You can see the field added on top, WP initiative. This field becomes WMP activity. There's an activity description. There is language up here, getting more specific. And to be clear, when we look at our data reporting, largely the reporting has been at the activity level. And this is just clarifying, and making the labels of the data cleaner and making it the same as, what's going on with those references in Appendix A of the WMP guidelines and in Appendix C of our drafting guidelines. This UMAT, I'll just call this out now. The reason why it is an acronym is because it's just too long. So it's too long for the field name. So it's UMAT ID. Utility mitigation activity tracking ID. Brian just quizzed me. So that's the GIS. Here, wait, I'm going to go back here. So, the reason why initiative feature data set is referenced up here is because in most of the features, in all of the features, these types of changes roll out. There are slight differences for audit features, slight differences for you know, inspections versus projects. So, but for the most part, this is a pattern, and you'll see it in all of the features in the initiative feature data set. Okay. On to the tabular schema. Same thing, same nature of the changes, but you just see it kind of play out slightly differently. So, you know, here we have utility mitigation activity tracking ID. We have, you know, it used to be that linking again, initiative category. It's just WMP category, WMP initiative, and then we have the activity name. And so this down here is showing one example. This is from table 1. So this is the example of how the column names, the field names, how they show up in the template workbook now. And you can see that there are no longer any fields that are called, you know, initiative activity or initiative category. It's just an activity, category, initiative. One only. And up in here too, just this language clarifying the relationship and the reporting intentions for table 1. Oh, yeah. I think we'll get a whole, we're trying out the adminning we see a hand and we are trying to let you. Are you able to? Okay.
Yeah, so
Marshall?
Marshall Payne, you should be able to unmute now.
Yeah, that worked. Thank you. Just real quick.
Oh, you muted
I
again.
think you might have muted yourself.
Okay, so this happened.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, I got it.
People unmute, they remute themselves. It's not you, it's the system.
It's like this delayed thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so just a real quick thing. In the previous slide, there was a reference to this new UMAT ID, right? You wanted us to change things to UMAT ID, but if you scroll forward or go forward on the slide deck, we're back to calling it utility mitigation activity tracking ID. Why not just have that also UMAT ID as well for here? Why the inconsistency in that?
Can I?
Yeah.
So the UMAT is specific to the spatial data, and I want to point out that this is going to get a little fiddly and technical, but that is the actual field name in the database. The alias for that field is still spelled out all the way. So as Jenny pointed out, we're just shortening that. It's a technical limitation with Esri's software that field names have a limit on character number, and we found out we were slightly over that when we changed the name from what did it used to be, Jenny?
Utility initiative tracking ID.
Utility initiative tracking ID to utility mitigation activity tracking ID. That just put us over the character limit. But what everyone will see, you know, if you're using the desktop software, what you'll actually see as the field name will be spelled out all the way. So that's just it's just a workaround for the actual field name only in the spatial data in the database, because we can't spell it out all the way technically.
And we tried to make that clear, and you can see like there's a little screenshot that catches the definition where it says this is the utility mitigation activity tracking ID. We could have just made it like UMAT ID all across the board, but it is, you know, we try to limit the kind of obscure acronyms because it just becomes, you know, weirder and weirder. Like, what does this stand for? So we tried to stay away from it, but that was the thinking.
And so I hear there's a second part. I just wanted to throw one more thing in there. This wasn't part of your question, but I want to be very clear. This is we're not making a new ID. This isn't something different. We just renamed.
Change the name, yeah.
Change the name, and we try really hard. And I say this every time we have one of these workshops or every time we have one of our quarterly meetings. We try really hard not to make changes like this when it's making no structural change. There's no difference, but it's just we're trying to make arbitrary changes because we know that causes work, especially with people who have ETL scripts. But
exactly, yeah. So that's
crossed that threshold for us where it was important to have alignment between the WMP technical guidelines and the data reporting, so there's clarity that this is the same ID. And because The name change came from a deeper structural change in the WMP technical guidelines about what activities are called, which we frankly think is a good change, right? Differentiating between making it clear that the thing that you're doing is an activity and that activities roll up into initiatives and initiatives roll up into categories. That was a good structural change. So it crossed that threshold for us to be worth it. We understand that that does create work for people, and it probably feels somewhat arbitrary to just change this name. But I think the clarity which across the WMP technical guidelines to the data guidelines in this case is worth it. So sorry,
Okay.
I piggybacked on your to get my little talking there.
No, that's good. It's good. It's good. It's good background information and understand it now. So with the changes, with that particular change and other things that we might be talking about here, is there a new geodatabase template that we'll have?
Yes, the new geodatabase template that reflects all of these changes is on the data team. It's on the energy safety website under the data team portion of that, whatever you want to call it, our page on the larger energy safety website. It's at the top, and it is the draft final version. If somebody can put that, I don't have a laptop in front of me. Sorry, if somebody would put that link in the chat, that would be helpful. To the page, not to the direct guidance. I will also get out there proactively about that and say at least one technical GIS specialist at a thank you, Aaron. I see that popped up. We don't pay Aaron. Aaron's just very helpful and on it all the time. So thanks, Aaron. At least one person from a utility has reached out to me already and said that they have an issue with the with accessing the draft version 4 of the template. I'm waiting to hear from anyone else if they have the same issue. It's related to us using date only fields, which is a new thing that was implemented in a new version of Esri software that honestly I didn't even realize that I had. Okay. Yep. So I'm seeing a comment. So I wasn't 100% on this until I heard from anyone else, but hearing that it's more than one person, I will post a new draft version that takes those back to the older style date fields that will allow flexibility, because it seems like a lot of people are not on the version of Esri software that we're on, and that using that type of field is going to cause a problem. So just Marshall or anybody else, if you go grab that from the website right now, and if you can't use the initiative or even open the initiatives features, don't freak out. It's because of that, and we'll take care of that.
Okay.
We're going to provide draft or in the final.
Okay, and just a follow up on the word draft. When I mean, we don't want to invest heavily in something that's going to be changing quite maybe underneath of us while we're trying to move data over. So is there a final?
Yeah, I can give a process overview. This is probably a good prompt to give a process overview. So significant changes, substantive changes, we publish for 30-day comment. And so right now we are in our second 30-day comment on these draft data guidelines. We did the draft, we had 30-day comment period. We took in the comments, we made revisions to that draft, and now the revised draft, including the template geodatabase, is available for the comment period, our second 30-day comment period. To adopt, and then that's when the draft goes away and they're effective. When that happens, we would not have significant substantive changes. That's like corrections. There could still be corrections. We are aware that something like changing a typo in a field name is significant in the template geodatabase in a way that, correcting a typo in the guidelines document is not. So we're aware of those things. And that is like an example of something that we wouldn't do. We wouldn't just be like, oh, we're going to change a field name and then not have a comment period, not have, so that's kind of a long way of explaining the process that the draft only goes away when the guidelines are adopted. And that adoption cannot take place until this existing 30-day comment period has passed. So that's the timeline. You kind of, I guess you have to kind of do your own risk management assessment on that of waiting until adoption or taking the draft, and the feedback, like Brian just said about the date issue, kind of taking that all in and doing your best to plan accordingly.
Well, and that was what I was
Right.
gonna say.
So how's
Oh, sorry,
the
go ahead.
final, how does the anticipated final date mesh up with the delivery date that you're expecting? I mean, how much time are you giving, operators to prepare the data once it's finalized?
Once adoption, so I mean, I cannot like promise when we will adopt. So that's a future date. We haven't noticed the meeting and I can't commit to an adoption date. The first submission of data related to these guidelines is likely to be in relation to the submission of WMPs. Those base WMPs, I think, will probably come in March, and they do not include a geodatabase data submission. So the first submission of GIS data it will be with May, the Q1 2025 submission in May. So
Okay.
Yeah, with the caveat, as you said, that we don't know, technically, we don't know when we're gonna notice this for final, but
Yes.
as long as we notice this for final at a reasonable time for that, then
yes,
we
I
would
mean,
anticipate the first spatial data submission that followed these guidelines would be the
May 1st,
Q1, which comes in on May 1.
yes.
Yeah,
And that
okay.
is,
All
okay.
right, all right. So I'm trying to keep the calendar square in my head. So the Q1 QDR will be delivered using the existing template. The Q2 QDR will be delivered using the new template.
So let me just, because we did get comments asking about the effective date. The guidelines are written effective Jan 1. That means that they start in the Jan 1, 2025 reporting period. So the Q1 2025 data submission, which comes in May, is as written in the guidelines, that should take place in the new schema, the new guidelines. These are the effective guidelines controlling the Q1 2025 submission, assuming that they are adopted. So
Okay.
these are draft, they're open for comments, and when they are adopted, they will be effective retroactively to January 1st. And that there was some confusion because the February 1st submissions for Q4 of 2024 came in during comment, like while the draft data guidelines were out there. And so there was confusion in the comment period about what is this February 1st submission under, and that was clarified to February 1st, submitted under version 3.2. Because those are effective. These are not yet effective. And if anyone has further questions on that, you guys can reach out. Yeah, I would say don't wait probably until the end of the comment period, because that gets really close. But if that's not clear. Okay. Thank you for your questions, Marshall.
Sure.
All right, I think we got through table 1, and table 12 is the mid-year and end-of-year targets that are related to table 1. So table 1, all the initiatives, all the activities from the WMP, and then mid-year and end-of-year targets are set for those as applicable in table 12. So you just see the same type of changes reflected out there. Activity, category, initiative. And another table that is really affected by this change is table 11, where the financial reporting happens. And we added a column there in order to allow the kind of disentanglement of the initiative reporting and the activity reporting. Financials, the existing requirement already required financial reporting at the activity level for those activities that are defined by energy safety. And then, the rest roll up. It's just at the initiative level. So that's why you see here this note WMP activity, and that if it's blank, then that reporting line is intended to report on all the activities under that initiative, according to these additional breakouts, right? None of this has changed. So this is just, again, this is just the implementation of this clarifications around the category initiative activity hierarchy and how it plays out in here. The meaning, I would say the meaning of things hasn't really shifted. It's more just, it's clearer now. Oh, and I'll actually add here that because we did get a question about it, you can't see it on the screen grab, but we had gotten a question about utility initiative tracking IDs, formerly known as, right now, utility mitigation activity tracking IDs, and whether like you're allowed to report multiple IDs on one reporting line here. And you know, the answer is yes, and I believe that it now references that, like it says, you know, a plural allowance reference in there. So that's a little bit clearer now, so that it's consistent with this direction to roll up, you know, multiple activities. That means, of course, you're going to need to be able to list multiple IDs on that reporting line. And then the parentheticals, you could see them on the previous slide, but I thought I would highlight those here. There are a few limited cases where a category and an initiative or two initiatives under different categories have the same name. And in those cases, we've added parentheticals to distinguish them in the data reporting. This, you could see, I highlighted it on table 11, where risk methodology and assessment, it's the same name under the category and the initiative. So we have the parenthetical distinguishing the initiative from the category. And then in Appendix C, that's where these grabs are from, the data guidelines Appendix C. This is an example of the same initiative name, but one under grid design, operations, and maintenance, while the other is under vegetation management and inspections. So the parentheticals distinguish, you know, those two for the initiative names that are the same. And that's important to call out here because it's implemented to make the data reporting clear, but this is a difference from the WMP, you know, Appendix A. The table there, it's all kind of context and stuff, and it's not as necessary as it is in the data reporting to make sure that it's distinct.
We do have one.
Oh, a hand? Yeah.
I still didn't have the ability.
Oh, let me see. Maybe I can do it. Aaron, can you unmute yourself?
Sorry, I can't hear.
As mute participant. Can you maybe message Axel and just see if he might be able to do it?
He's still left. Yeah, he's sitting there.
Okay, we're getting help.
Someone.
Ariana, were you asked? We're requesting technical assistance. We should have all the power of the unmute, but sadly we don't.
Sorry about that, but you can now unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, perfect. It automatically muted again right away, but thank you for taking my question. Erin from SDG&E. I'm just curious, I do notice the change log and the call outs that all the changes with respect to WMP fields, like the not even category in the geospatial, but the initiative and units represented, it's not applicable to initiative audit, which would be the QA/QC programs that even we're just seeing here, or initiatives. So I'm just curious as to why we wouldn't have the same consistency across that feature class as well, because they are their own program as well. Any kind of feedback as to why that was implemented that way?
You're saying that there's a missing parenthetical?
No, what I'm saying is that initiative audit in the changelog for the geodatabase, it says, you know, it's not including everything except, right? So this new WMP initiative, or not new, the changed field, it does not exist there. Units represented doesn't exist there. And so just seeing that these QA/QC are initiatives in itself, why would we not have those same WMP fields follow through in initiative audit feature classes as
I
well?
think because the audit references
Yeah,
the main feature, right?
right. Yeah, the audits are not typically understood to be initiatives in and of themselves, right? So that's generally what we're looking for in the initiative audit feature is a company's activities auditing its own initiatives.
Isn't that right here, like QA/QC asset management, QA/QC veg management?
Oh.
That's its initiative, right?
Yeah, I
That
mean,
is-
that's one where I
yeah.
may need to back with our policy team to decide if they are considering that as a, because I take the point. I mean, you're essentially
Okay.
correct. If that is
Yeah.
an initiative,
Well,
then
this is about this is about the parenthetical is about,
we're not talking about that. Don't worry
Yeah.
about that.
It's
But
just
that's-
showing the example that they are programs. Yeah, sorry, I kind of brought it up at the wrong time.
No, it's okay. It's not,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to do.
Mhm.
but I asked you
Yeah.
about that. It was because it references the original.
I think the answer to what Jenny's asking is that, yeah, we still have all the information we need because you can get that from the original, but, yeah, basically, it's a good point, Aaron. Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
taking talk to our policy team and find out,
Okay.
and frankly, the team that's gonna also, or the client team that's gonna be trying to verify the completion of all the activities, because
Right.
yes, if that's an
Mhm.
initiative on its own and it has targets, then it will have its own set,
Yeah.
ID and its own set of information, and so.
Right. And
You may-
and so just a little kind of information around how we do. I mean, we're adding these fields as it is, because it is in its own. And really, when we think about automation and trying to kind of minimize the amount of effort in different areas, having that information in the right places consistently is important. And so, when you think about the geodatabase and it rolling up to table 1 or whatever else, having those key fields are important. Although there's obviously ways around, and you've always said we can add to the far right of the table. So whatever you guys choose, but I just wanted to know if there was a reason behind that. And units represented, when we're auditing our vegetation programs, we need those units. So when we're trying to quantify the number of units QA/QC'd, we need that as well, because that comes from the parent or the program it's auditing. So it's good to have that detail within that feature for us anyways. So we'll continue to keep it there, but I just wanted to double check as we're going through these
Yeah, and
revisions.
sorry.
Mhm.
Something that you mentioned was, I'm just gonna restate it because it was in my head to mention that. In any case where the schema that we're publishing is the minimum. This sounds funny to say when there's 1,100 fields in it, but for the database, the geodatabase, for the spatial data, the schema that we're publishing is the bare minimum of the information that we think we need in the places that we need it. If the utility giving us the data feel that there is extra information that is helpful or that is needed, or if the utility is using the data that are delivered to us for their own purposes and have an internal business reason to add extra information, if there are extra additional unique IDs or tracking it relevant, as you mentioned, Aaron, we have always said, we're okay with you adding fields to this, that's fine. What doesn't work is adding a field and using the added field as a reason not to give us information in the fields that we need. And if you're going to add fields, I would very much, for my own, this is just me now on the data team, Brian, for my own reasons, I would very much like to have the added fields at the end of the attribute table and not salted in. But if you get everyone, that's helpful for me for silly, minimal technical reasons. But it is, yeah. I think we did finally, Jenny is telling me, I think we did finally get that in the guidelines, so it isn't instruction that I've given on
Brian's just been around too long.
various meetings, but I think that is a recent addition.
Thank you.
But yeah,
Um,
but thank you, Erin. That's helpful. And like I said, it gives me a tape to do from this meeting, which is I have to talk to policy about the need for that because you may have just pointed out something that we missed.
Yeah, but if it doesn't, if it's not something that we can address prior to adoption, then it sounds like there's a workaround for now, which is to call out for everyone. Thank you. Okay, so that concludes the discussion of implementing WMP Guidelines Appendix A and the related changes there. I'm going to move on, but if someone thinks of a question that still has to do with all that stuff, feel free to still bring it up. So this is a change that affects a few places in section 3, the GIS reporting section. And this change has to do with clarifying inspections versus project reporting. So this existing language under asset inspections pointed out, hey, asset inspections feature, that's for reporting inspections only. And if there's a mix of both inspecting and doing work, repairing, placing equipment, stuff like that, that should be reported under grid hardening. So we have reflected that same language out into the related inspection versus project features. So on the flip side of, asset inspections, we have grid hardening. And so grid hardening again reiterates grid hardening feature is for reporting work. If there's only inspections being performed, that should be done under asset inspections. On the veg side, vegetation inspections, this feature is only for reporting inspections work. If vegetation manipulation is happening, that should be under vegetation management. And again, down under veg management, that is reflected as well. And even though this is not new language, I highlighted it here, that section 3.6.3.6.1, it does call out that, according to these requirements, vegetation management projects involve the physical manipulation of vegetation. So we're saying these things count as veg management project work. So that's what should be reported here. And if these things aren't happening and, there's observations, checking, things like that, that needs to be under inspections. There's been issues in the reporting of inspections and projects being tangled up and reported under each other, and, and that needs to be clarified. So the language here supports that. Okay, a next category of changes are field name simplifications. This was a call out that came in through the comment period and was a great call out. And since we were having to do some field name changes anyway, to implement Appendix A of the WMP guidelines, we took the opportunity to clean up some of the field names for simplification. And the affected tables I've listed here. And you can see in the screenshot example, this is from table 11, like how the old field names were so long and had a lot of contextual information. And that contextual information has been moved over to the definition of the field and leaving the actual label of the field cleaner. And again, none of these changes affect the meaning of the field, the function of the field. This is really just a cleanup. But because it looks really, it looks really like a lot of, edits and stuff like that, we're just calling out, what the thinking is behind that. Because it can look a lot like, oh, wow, this field is changing a lot. But really, it's just clearer and better defined now, even though the meaning's the same. Oh, and again, this field name simplifications, this is only the tabular reporting. So the the field names in the Tableau Geo database are not under this specific change. Similarly, there were some units column simplifications in tables 4 and 10. This is a similar idea. It just plays out a little bit differently, where, in the old version, there's like a calculation instruction contained in the column. Those calculation definitions have been moved to Appendix B, the glossary, leaving the actual template workbook cleaner. And in other cases where it didn't really need a glossary definition, it just needed to be just kind of simplified and cleaned up, that has been implemented. Okay, isolated changes. So these are all the changes that we've discussed so far have, flowed out to different places in the guidelines. These are just like, spot changes. The units represented field was added to, this is what Aaron called out, all of the initiative feature data set, except for the initiative audits. The asset location field has been changed to asset OHUG, and surface pad mount removed from the domain value. In the tabular side, line type was added to table 4. That was program need, and it's our understanding that that's been reported previously in data requests. So we're hoping that's not too bumpy of an implementation, since we know that data has been provided to the department at program requests previously. We're just kind of formalizing now. And table 3 added to the annual WMP template workbook to provide projections, which was an oversight and has been corrected. And for people who don't just have it in their mind, table 3 is the table for reporting electrical corporation defined metrics. Okay, any more questions? I kind of ran through, we're kind of coming up on time and I want to leave enough time for comments. So kind of ran through those changes, but if those spark any other questions? Looking like no.
Here's a question in the chat.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Geodatabase possibly being released with the Esri date only field address.
Oh, is that the one? That's what was discussed. It
Yeah,
might have been a late.
is there a follow-up question on that? Whoever,
No, that just need ASAP to update FME/AGML jobs.
Right.
I don't know who.
Oh.
who's that?
This is
Who's
from
that?
Jonathan Reynolds.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Jonathan.
I just joined late. Missed
No,
that.
I don't think so, because he chimed, I saw him chime in via the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, Jonathan, if I can't get that up, I will share it with you directly, because I already have it, because as I mentioned, someone else already reached out to me, and in the process of diagnosing what the issue was, I made a version that isn't on the website that has those reverted to just the regular date field. So I'll get that to you at least if we can't get it up, but we need to circle and figure out whether that's going to be considered a substantive change or not.
Yeah, I think that,
I don't
It
even want
would
to
be-
speculate on it right now. I'm
no,
just
but
saying.
I would like to just kind of put out there that anyone on the call who is affected by this issue, if you could reach out, just email Brian, email the data team, email the department. Don't wait for the end of the comment period, since this is it sounds like it's a more urgent thing. It might just be a correction to, a technical issue with, like Brian said, that was in the Esri software. So
My position is this shouldn't be considered substantive.
Right.
It is a minor correction back to what we were
yes,
doing before.
reverting
It's an
to,
unchanged.
we're unchanging a change in that case, but it would be helpful to actually see if it's affecting you. And you haven't actually told us in this meeting. Anyone who's told us in the meeting doesn't need to tell us again. But if anyone in the meeting hasn't chimed in and they're thinking the same thing, yes, this is a problem for us, please just either chime in the chat or let us know. It would just be nice to have the context to understand how widespread the problem is. And then we'll consider that an urgent issue, and we'll still communicate out on the resolution of it. Did anyone else pop up? Comments or?
Don't see any more hands or.
Okay, I meant to say this at the beginning, but we did receive comments that, you might not see implemented. So suggestions and, issues communicated in the first round of public comments that you might not see action on at this time. I just want to let everyone know, all of the stakeholders and all of the electrical corporations that, we're taking those comments seriously, and we have intentions to develop out solutions to address the problems that are raised. And I think in the past, we've talked about, workshopping some of that, and that is the plan for this year. So just because if you don't see it acted on now in these guidelines, do not despair. It's on the radar, and we know that there are real issues, and we really do want to make the reporting, better for the department and better for you guys, and just, as painless as we can to get the information that is needed. All right, so with that, I'll just head into the public comment period. If anyone has a prepared comment or just wants to share a thought, now is the time, and raise your hand or enter into the chat if you so please. And we can wait a few minutes if inspiration needs to strike. You know that this revision had a lot fewer changes, so maybe there are no comments. Wait a moment. Actually, I could very slowly start saying that we will conclude the meeting, because that always seems to make someone remember that they wanted to say something. We might conclude soon if you don't decide to comment.
Big countdown.
I know, like a timer to count down creative.
Really big hourglass.
Yeah.
You just put on the table.
Oh, Aaron entered a comment into the chat. Can someone pull that up? And I can't get it while I'm presenting.
Sure, I can read it. So Aaron Zor says, not related to the changes, however, something we encountered in recent QDR is the short data type for the following fields in PSPS. Total customer minutes, critical infrastructure duration. Long would be a better suited data type.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, that's just a comment on
Yep.
spatial data.
Yep, thank
We
you.
also have a comment from Lau Nelson. PG&E wants to confirm that the annual tabular will be submitted 3 days prior to WMP final submission due date and not the pre-submission due date.
It will be submitted 3 days prior to the final submission due date. Well, it seems like that's it. So thank you. Thank you everyone for tuning in and participating throughout our guidelines process in our public workshops and our comment periods, and hopefully in some developmental workshops to come. I think I see a comment popped up, which we can take in. I don't know if should we read it or?
Somebody else adding another field that should have a ability about critical facility population impact.
Is it the same short D long answer?
I think so.
Okay, thank you.
I may just, it doesn't really make a big storage difference, so I may just go through and make sure those. I don't, to be honest, don't know why they may have changed.
Okay,
Probably an oversight on my part in the draft. Thank you. Thank you everyone for catching my mistakes in that case. That's what it is, which is likely.
so keep an eye out for our next notice, hopefully for our adoption meeting, and thank you again for participating, and everyone enjoy the rest of your day.